one of the most useful things you can ask yourself about a piece of work is just really pushing at what compels you about it and being really clear about that. And that might shift as you go on, but I think just always really keeping an eye on that and knowing that for yourself, even if you don't know the fullness of where that feeling comes from, will be the most useful thing you can do for yourself as you continue going through that process. My name is Vinay Patel. I'm a playwright. For people who are thinking about having a change of career and moving into writing, I think the first thing I would say is don't rush to quit the day job, partly because there's something about writing being the exciting thing that you're doing, that is your secret thing that you go back to, like either way from like the office or the pub or whatever, where it's so fully yours and not exposed to anyone else. You'll only get that experience once when you're starting out, and that is the point where you're at your absolute most freest. And I found that was a really, like looking back on it now, I didn't really understand how much of a comfort and a use that was for me. I think if you want to make writing your professional career, then that is absolutely a goal that is achievable. I think it's just the place to start with is not to start with how do I make a career of writing. I think it is to go, what are the stories that I'd like to tell, and what are the formats I'd like to tell that in, and what's the support I need to do that. Like for me personally, I started off from going from a full-time job to working part-time for a lot of time, and then I moved back to a full-time job and then back to part-time, and it was only after the writing work itself became too overwhelming for me to continue doing both things at the time that I set it aside and was like, okay, I'm going to make this my full-time work. But I would just really stress that just because you're not doing it writing full-time does not mean that you're not a good artist, you're not a good writer. And I would actually just use that time as a real way to look at craft. I think the exciting thing to do when you're moving over into writing for something else is just spend a lot of time seeing things that you don't think you like, reading things that you don't like, setting yourself little challenges, like even just 10-minute little short plays, going, I'm going to write this in a style that I've never written before, or I'm going to like try and write this a whole lifetime without any scene changes, or I'm just going to write two people in a room for 10 minutes. Just look at different ways of maintaining tension and building character that sort of push at the edges of where you are, because the cost for doing that becomes much higher the further along you get. But when you're at the start of things, when you're just coming into it, when you're still able to hold on to being a student of the form, that is when you can do your most exciting and thrilling and lovely work, actually, because it's still all yours. So I think the most interesting piece of advice I've been given as a writer, and the most useful ones, are the big one, which is you just have to finish the thing, which sounds incredibly obvious, but it is also the thing that most people don't do. So finishing the piece of work, even if you don't think it's great, and trusting in the process. Like, you don't have to be a genius off the first draft. Like, you have to really take that pressure off yourself. Just remember that it is a process, that you will create a first draft. Like, I have a drawer full of all the first drafts I've ever written, and whenever I get really cocky about going, yeah, I'm going to really kill it this time, and just looking at it like, no, these are all terrible, and they all start in a terrible place. But it's through the work that it becomes good. So you don't have to be a genius to do it. It's through the process that things will come. But also just in terms of theatre in particular, I remember I was talking to an older theatre maker, and they were saying the thing that makes theatre in particular distinct is, as opposed to other forms, I think, you can find a way to write a story for television that is exciting and almost cerebral in its construction. But when you're writing a piece of theatre, if your heart isn't in it, an audience can tell. And I remember them telling me that, and I was like, I wasn't sure about the truth of it. And then I remember trying to write a thing, partly because I was like, I want to write something about this, rather than it coming from a really emotional place for me. And it was just dead as a piece of writing, and an audience could tell that it was one of the most mortifying experiences of my life. So I think one of the most useful things you can ask yourself about a piece of work is just really pushing at what compels you about it and being really clear about that. And that might shift as you go on, but I think just always really keeping an eye on that and knowing that for yourself, even if you don't know the fullness of where that feeling comes from, will be the most useful thing you can do for yourself as you continue going through that process.